Today, we are going to dive into what is arguably the most demanding topic in the entire field of economics. Going to focus on the strategies for becoming wealthy. Frankly, that is the straightforward part of the equation. Instead, we are going to focus on the mechanics of how to stop being poor. That is where the real difficulty lies. Most people operate under the delusion that poverty is simply a lack of cash. They are fundamentally mistaken. Poverty is not just a specific number reflecting in a bank account. Poverty functions as a gravitational force. It is a sophisticated trap. It is a closed-loop system meticulously engineered to keep you locked inside, forcing you to spin your wheels in place until you have exhausted all your energy and eventually die. I refer to this phenomenon as the physics of poverty. The escape velocity principle. If you want to truly grasp why you feel stuck in place, you actually need to understand the principles of rocket science. When a rocket attempts to depart from the surface of the Earth, it is engaged in a violent struggle against the force of gravity. In order to successfully reach orbit, it must achieve a very specific, non-negotiable speed. We call this escape velocity. If that rocket utilizes 99% of the fuel required for the journey, but fails to hit that exact specific speed, do you know what the outcome is? It doesn't get 99% of the way to the moon. Instead, it stalls in the atmosphere, falls straight back to Earth, and it crashes. This is a perfect mirror for what happens to the working class every single day. You put in the hard work, you manage to save a tiny bit of money, and you try to pull yourself out of the hole. You get halfway up the wall, and then, life happens. Your car's transmission fails, you fall ill, your landlord raises the rent, or gravity simply kicks back in. Because you did not hit that financial escape velocity, you tumble all the way back to the very bottom. In fact, you often land lower than where you started because now you are discouraged. Now you are physically tired. Now you have even less fuel than before. Linear effort versus exponential results. This is the reason simply working a little bit harder never actually produces a result. In the kinematics of poverty, linear effort usually yields zero tangible results. You don't need incremental effort. You need exponential force to rupture the gravitational pull of the system. You must realize that the system is essentially rigged against you, not because of some hidden conspiracy, but because of the cold laws of mathematics. Poverty is an incredibly expensive state of being. When you are poor, the cost of living is actually higher for you. You cannot afford to buy items in bulk, which means you end up paying a much higher unit price for every piece of food you eat. You cannot afford high-quality boots, so you are forced to buy cheap boots that fall apart every single year. You cannot afford a proactive dentist, so you wait until the tooth is rotting and you are forced to pay for an expensive root canal. This is famously known as the Vimes-Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness, the penalty system. The system essentially levies against you for the crime of being poor. It charges you late fees. It charges you overdraft fees. It demands high interest rates from you because, on paper, you are considered a risk. Consequently, you are forced to run a race while carrying a heavy backpack, while the wealthy are running with a strong wind at their backs. And here is the most lethal element of the trap. Poverty is not just an external condition. It is internal. When you remain inside this trap for an extended period of time, it physically alters your brain and it rewires your neural pathways. It locks your body into a state of constant fight or flight. Your IQ literally drops by approximately 13 points. This 13-point drop is not just a statistic, it is a profound cognitive impairment. To put that number into perspective, let us look at the benchmarks. Staying awake for a full 24 hours results in a loss of roughly 10 IQ points. Being in a state of alcohol intoxication typically costs you between 10 and 15 points. This means that the constant weight of financial stress is actually more damaging to your brain than losing a full night of sleep. And it is nearly equivalent to navigating your daily life while being clinically drunk. This means that being poor is cognitively equivalent to trying to navigate life while being perpetually drunk or completely sleep deprived. You stop formulating plans for 10 years into the future, and you start panicking about the next 10 minutes. You become a reactive person, not a proactive one. The poverty loop. This creates what I call the poverty loop. Low income creates high levels of stress. High stress leads to poor decision making. Bad decisions lead to a total lack of assets. Lack of assets leads back to low income. Round and round the cycle goes, a perfect, self-sustaining vicious circle. But there is a definitive path out. The laws of physics can be disrupted if you can generate enough concentrated force. In this video, we are going to reverse engineer this entire trap. We are going to examine the 5 specific chains that are currently holding you down. We are going to discuss the scarcity tax that systematically drains your cognitive bandwidth. We are going to talk about the dopamine trap that continuously steals your liquid cash. We are going to address the linear income trap that wastes your most precious resource. And finally, I am going to demonstrate how to build your own engine, how to generate the specific escape velocity required to leave the atmosphere of poverty once and for all. Once you finally break orbit, the entire nature of the game changes. The friction of the system disappears, the silence of space arrives, and you finally fly. But first, we have to survive the initial launch. Let us begin the countdown. Let us enter the first loop. I call this the scarcity tax. Loop 1. Cognitive bandwidth. Most observers think that if you simply hand a poor person a stack of money, their problems are instantly solved. But history shows that if you give a lottery winner millions of dollars, they are frequently bankrupt again within 3 years. Why does this happen? Because poverty isn't merely a shortage of cash. It is a fundamental lack of cognitive bandwidth. There was a groundbreaking study conducted by Sendil Mullanan at Harvard University. He discovered that when your mind is totally consumed by financial stress, when you are constantly obsessing over how to pay the rent or how to fix the family car, your effective IQ drops by 13 points. As we noted, that is a more severe impairment than losing a full night of sleep. This implies that when you are struggling with poverty, you are literally trying to function with a damaged processor. You are attempting to solve complex, long-term life problems with a brain that is trapped in emergency survival mode. You cannot visualize the future because you are too exhausted fighting the immediate present. This is the essence of the scarcity trap. When your bandwidth is limited, you make objectively bad choices. You accept the high-interest payday loan because you need the cash this second. You purchase the unhealthy food because it is cheap and it is fast. You are not a stupid person. You are simply an exhausted one. And the system is aware of this. The system actively exploits this. The mathematics of the poor. Let's look deeper at the Vimes boots theory. It works like this. A wealthy man can afford to buy a pair of high-quality, durable boots for $50. Those boots will serve him for 10 years, meaning his cost is only $5. A poor man cannot spare $50 at one time. He only has tellers in his pocket. So he buys a cheap pair of boots. But those cheap boots fall apart after just 1 year of use. Consequently, the next year he must spend another $10 on another pair, and the year after that. Over a 10-year period, the poor man has spent $100 on boots. The rich man only spent $50. The poor man spent twice as much money as the rich man, and his feet were wet and cold for the entire decade. This is the brutal mathematics of being poor. It is expensive to have no money. You pay late fees, you pay overdraft penalties, you pay higher interest rates. You buy tiny, expensive quantities of toilet paper because you cannot afford the bulk package, which means you pay significantly more per sheet. The system effectively charges you a premium for your lack of capital. How to break the first loop. So, how do we begin to break this first loop? How do we stop the financial bleeding? You need to build a buffer. Your primary financial objective is not to get rich. It is not to purchase a house. It is not to be investing in the stock market. Your singular initial goal is to save $1,000 or even just $500. Put that money in a separate, isolated account and do not touch it for any reason. This money is not meant for spending. This money is for the purpose of buying back your brain. When you possess a buffer, a car breaking down is merely a minor inconvenience. It is no longer a life-threatening disaster. When you have that buffer, you don't have to walk into the payday loan office. You don't have to pay the scarcity tax. You stop merely reacting to emergencies and you begin the process of managing them. That $1,000 buys you something far more precious than gold. It buys you cognitive bandwidth. It restores your IQ. It allows you to actually sleep at night. It allows you to finally look up from the ground and see the horizon. Most people attempt to jump straight into investing. They try to skip this fundamental step. They are essentially trying to build a skyscraper on top of a swamp. You must drain the swamp first. You must build the buffer. You must buy the boots that last 10 years. This requires real sacrifice. It requires genuine pain. For a few months, you might have to live with a level of extreme discipline that feels like a total system reset, but you are doing it for a vital reason. You are purchasing your freedom from the scarcity tax. Loop 2. The dopamine trap. We move to the second loop. This is the most emotional-aged one of all. I call this the dopamine trap. You have almost certainly heard the social criticism. People will say, if you are so poor, why do you have the brand new iPhone? Why are you wearing expensive sneakers? Why are you eating at restaurants when you have groceries in your kitchen? It is very easy to pass judgment from the outside looking in, but let us examine the actual biology of the situation. When you are trapped in the poverty loop, your daily life is a source of constant pain. Your cortisol levels, the body's primary stress hormone, are permanently high. You feel insignificant. You feel invisible to society. Your brain is literally screaming for some form of relief. It is screaming for a win. So when you walk into a store and you buy that new pair of shoes or that branded handbag, your brain releases a powerful hit of dopamine. For a few fleeting minutes, the pain of your reality disappears. For a few minutes, you feel successful. You feel like you actually matter. This is not just spending. This is a form of self-medication. You are using consumption as an anesthetic to numb the constant pain of your reality. But here is the lethal trap. The relief is temporary, but the debt you've created is permanent. The dopamine hit fades in 20 minutes. The credit card debt lasts for 20 years. This is the fundamental, core difference between how the rich and the poor perceive money. The poor see money as a tool to buy pleasure. The rich see money as a tool to buy freedom. When a poor person receives $500, their first thought is, what can I buy with this? When a wealthy person receives $500, their first thought is, how can I invest this? Assets versus liabilities. We call this the struggle between assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. If you buy a designer purse, that is a liability. It loses its value the second you walk out of the boutique. If you buy a share of a stock, that is an asset. It is a small machine that works for you while you are sleeping. Most people trapped in the low-income loop are literally drowning in liabilities. They have the nice car, they have the trendy clothes, they have the streaming subscriptions and the latest gadgets. They might look rich, but they are bleeding wealth every single day of their lives. They are feeding the dopamine monster while they are starving their own future. So, how do we break this specific loop? How do we undergo a detox? You need to, and I call a financial detox. This is a period of radical, uncompromising elimination, a total reset for your internal processor. This isn't a permanent lifestyle. It is a temporary reset for your brain's reward system. For the next 6 months, you cut everything that isn't essential. Your Netflix. You stop eating at restaurants. You stop buying new clothes entirely. You drink plain water instead of soda. You walk to your destination instead of taking an Uber. You strip your entire life down to the absolute bare essentials: food, shelter, and basic transportation. It will be incredibly boring. It will be socially difficult. Your friends might even laugh at you. But you have to constantly tell yourself, I am not poor. I am currently in training. When you stop getting your dopamine hits from spending money, your brain will naturally start to rewire its own circuitry. You will begin to find a new kind of pleasure in seeing your bank account balance grow. You will start to get a high from the act of saving. And that is a completely different kind of dopamine. That is the dopamine of control. Once you realize that you do not need the newest phone to achieve happiness, you become a dangerous person to the system. You become truly free because the system can no longer manipulate your behavior with shiny objects. You have finally broken the addiction. Loop. The linear income trap. Now we enter the third loop. This is the specific one that keeps you perpetually tired. I call this the linear income trap. Most of us are taught a very simple, flawed equation for life. Time equals money. If you want more money, the logic goes you simply have to work more hours. You get a second job. You sign up for overtime. You drive for Uber on your weekends. But there is a fatal mathematical flaw in this equation. Time is a finite resource. You only have 24 hours in a single day, and your body requires sleep. This means your income is mathematically capped. There is a hard ceiling that you can never break through, no matter how hard you work. But your expenses have no such cap. This brings us to the silent killer of the working class: inflation. Inflation is essentially a tax that is levied on people who sell their time. When the government increases the money supply, prices rise. The price of a loaf of bread goes up. The price of gas goes up. But do your wages go up at the same speed? Absolutely not. Wages are what economists describe as sticky. Your boss will likely wait a year, or perhaps 2, before offering you a 3% raise. But by the time that happens, inflation has already devoured 8% of your actual purchasing power. You are effectively running up a down escalator, and the escalator is moving faster than you can possibly run. So, you work even harder, you sell even more of your hours, you miss your children's birthdays, you ruin your physical health, and at the end of the year, you are actually poorer than when you started. This is the literal definition of insanity. You cannot win a rigged game by simply playing by the rules. You have to change the game entirely. You have to selling your time and start selling value. Building a skill stack. How exactly do you do this? You build what we call a skill stack. Most people spend their lives trying to be the absolute best at one single thing. They want to be the best accountant or the best graphic designer. That is extremely difficult. That market is incredibly crowded. The secret to exponential growth is to become pretty good at 2 or 3 unrelated skills and then combine them. Look at Scott Adams, the creator of the comic Dilbert. He was not the world's best artist. He was not the funniest writer on the planet, and he was certainly not the most experienced businessman. But he was quite good at all 3, and when he stacked those 3 skills together, he became unique. He became exponential. If you are currently a low-income worker, do not just go out and get a second job flipping burgers. That is just more linear income. Instead, focus on becoming a high-value hybrid. For example, think of the software developer who doesn't just write code, masters the art of explaining technical ROI to business stakeholders. Or consider the graphic designer who's selling logos and starts selling conversion, optimized sales psychology. You must become a double threat. If you are a construction worker, spend your nights learnings. Now you are no longer just a laborer. You are a contractor who has the ability to close major deals. If you are a waiter, spend your time learning copywriting. Now you are not just carrying plates of food, you are designing menus that sell high-margin items. You must become a double threat. When you stack your skills, you successfully detach your income from your hours. You become significantly harder for the system to replace. You become an asset, not just a commodity. The market pays for rarity, does not pay for effort. If you can be replaced by a teenager or a robot within a week, you will always be poor. You must build a moat around your income, and that moat is your unique skill stack. Loop 4, social gravity. Now, we enter the 4th loop. This is arguably the hardest chain to break. I call this social gravity. There is a famous saying that states, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." If your 5 closest friends are broke, you will inevitably be the 6th. If your 5 best friends are constantly complaining about the state of the economy, you will be the 6th. If your 5 friends have no ambition, you will be the 6th. Why is this the case? Because human beings are naturally mimicking machines. We have something in our biology called mirror neurons. We subconsciously copy the behaviors, the language patterns, and the mindset of the tribe that surrounds us. If you are trying to escape poverty, but you are surrounded by people who have already accepted poverty as their fate, you are fighting a losing battle. This brings us back to crab bucket effect. If you place a single crab in a bucket, it can easily crawl out. But if you put 10 crabs in that same bucket, and one of them tries to escape, the other 9 will grab its legs and pull it back down to the bottom. They do not do this because they are evil or malicious. They do this because your success makes them feel unsafe in their own lives. Your escape highlights the reality of their imprisonment. When you begin your financial detox, when you start aggressively saving money, when you start learning those new skills, your old friends will notice, and they will not applaud your progress. They will attack you. They will say things like, "Why are you working so hard? You need to relax. Oh, you think you are better than us now. The whole game is rigged anyway. Why even bother trying?" This is the literal sound of social gravity. It is the sound of the crabs trying to pull you back bucket. If you listen to their voices, you stay in the bucket forever. You must understand that poverty is often a culture. It is a shared, communal story of victimhood. The government is bad. The rich are evil. I just have bad luck. This story is very comforting. It absolves you of all personal responsibility, but it keeps you permanently poor. Ruthless isolation. So how do you break this specific loop? You must practice what I call ruthless isolation. I am not suggesting that you have to be mean to your family or your childhood friends. You have to protect the sanctity of your mind. You simply cannot afford to spend 3 hours every day listening to someone complain about their life. That is mental poison. You need to find yourself a new tribe. Now you might say, but rich people don't want to hang out with someone like me. That is currently true. You cannot just walk into a private country club. But you live in the golden age of the internet. You can find virtual mentors. You can spend your time with Charlie Munger. You can spend your time with Albert Einstein. You can spend your time with the greatest minds in human history. Read their books, watch their deep dive interviews, listen to their podcasts every single day. Let their voices drown out the negative noise of your immediate environment. When you read a biography of a self-made billionaire, you are essentially downloading their entire operating system into your own brain. You are hacking your mirror neurons. You are choosing to be the average of the authors you read, rather than the people you happen to live next door to. This is how you escape the grave of your zip code. You build an entirely new neighborhood inside your mind. Loop 5. The compound void. And finally, we arrive at the 5th and final loop. This is the engine of wealth. I call this the compound void. Albert Einstein famously remarked, "Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." If you are currently trapped in the poverty loop, you are almost certainly on the wrong side of this mathematical equation. You are the one compounding. You have credit debt accumulating at 20% interest. You have car loans. You have student loans. The math is actively working against you. Every single day you wake up, you are technically poorer than you were the night before, even if you didn't spend a single dime. You are paddling a boat upstream, and the current is far stronger than your arms. The wealthy are on the opposite side of the river. They are the ones earning compound interest. They have their money in the S&P 500. They own real estate. They own shares in businesses. Every day they wake up, they are technically richer than they were the night before, even if they slept for the entire day. This is known as the snowball effect. If you want to escape the low-income trap, you must stop being the person who pays interest and start being the person who earns it. You must cross that line. How do you do this? You need to follow the 3 defined stages of escape. The 3 stages of escape. Stage 1. Survival. This is where you focus on stopping the bleeding. You cut your expenses to the absolute bone. You use your financial detox savings to aggressively pay off your high-interest debt. You kill the financial vampire that is currently your lifeblood. Stage 2. Accumulation. This is where you begin to buy assets. And I do not mean a primary residence or a car. I mean productive assets. You take just $10 a day, only $10, and you put into a low-cost index fund. You ignore the news. You ignore the flashy, temporary trends. You just buy a piece of the global economy and let it grow. You are building your own snowball. It will look tiny at first. It will look pathetic. But you must trust the math of compounding. Stage 3, freedom. This is the specific moment when your accumulated assets generate enough cash flow to cover your basic survival needs. This is escape velocity. The moment this happens, you have officially broken the gravitational pull. You no longer have to sell your time just to stay alive. You have options. You have dignity. Conclusion. Survive the launch. Now, let us review the loop one last time. We talked about the scarcity tax. We talked about the dopamine trap. We talked about the linear income trap. We talked about social gravity. And finally, we talked about the compound void. These are the heavy chains that bind you to the ground. But always remember this. Chains are made of metal, but they are forged in the mind. The door to the cage is open. It has actually always been open. The system wants you to stay inside where it's safe for them. Your friends want you to stay inside. Your own internal fear wants you to stay inside. But you now have the laws of physics on your side. You have the map. You just need the courage to walk out of the door. That is all for today. Thank you for watching.